Hey everyone. Ready to dive into a story that's pretty incredible and also kind of tragic.
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
We're talking about the Bloody Hundredth, a World War II bomber group.
Known for, well, facing some unbelievable odds.
Exactly. Imagine this, right? You're crammed in a B-17 bomber,
Engines are just roaring.
and you know you're about to fly straight into a storm of enemy fire.
It's a pretty intense scenario.
That's the world we're stepping into today, going beyond the typical World War II stories.
Right.
To really get a feel for the air war.
And what's so fascinating is how their story, the Bloody Huth's story, it helps us understand this much bigger piece of the war, the strategic bombing campaign against Germany.
Totally. And to guide us through all of this, we've
Yeah.
got an awesome resource. We're looking at an interview with John Orlof.
Okay.
He's one of the writers for the Apple TV series Masters of the Air.
Oh, cool.
And he's also worked on, some other incredible war dramas, Band of Brothers, The Pacific.
Right, he really knows his stuff.
So we're talking real expertise here.
Yeah, his insights are they're really valuable,
Combined with all the historical records we have.
It paints this, really vivid picture of what these airmen went through.
Okay, so let's get started with this name that has, really captured people's imaginations. The Bloody Hundredth. Why were they called that?
Well, the 100th Bombardment Group earned that nickname because they consistently faced really heavy losses.
Oh, wow.
And they were often given the most dangerous positions in the bombing formations.
Really?
Yeah, they were known as Tail End Charlie.
Oh, so they were flying at the back.
At the very back, yeah, meaning they were the first to encounter enemy fighters.
And the last to get any support.
Exactly.
So there was actually a tactical reason for that nickname.
Right.
It wasn't just bad luck. It makes you think about who was making those decisions, though, about positions and all that. But let's back up for a second. You mentioned strategic bombing. What was, the whole idea behind that? Did they really think they could win the war just by bombing Germany?
It's a really fascinating part of military history,
Yeah.
Between World War I and World War II, there was this whole idea that developed
Right.
that you could pretty much win a war just through air power.
Really?
Yeah, the thinking was that if you could, cripple the enemy's industry and their ability to just make war materials, you wouldn't need as many boots on the ground. You know what I mean?
Wow, so they were essentially trying to, win the war from the sky.
Kinda, yeah.
Did that actually work?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
As ambitious as it was, it ultimately fell short.
Interesting.
Why? Well, I think there were a few key reasons. First, it totally underestimated, the ability of German industry to adapt and just keep producing, even under intense bombing,
Yeah.
Second, it was incredibly hard to hit specific targets with the technology back then.
Right.
A lot of times, those bombs miss their marks.
Causing more damage.
Unintended damage, yeah, and civilian casualties, unfortunately.
That's awful.
Yeah. And, well, the third reason was, in the end, they realized,
Yeah.
ground troops were still really crucial for achieving victory.
So it was a bold idea, but maybe a little too optimistic, looking back.
Maybe so, yeah.
Okay.
But here's the thing. The commitment to this strategy it was massive.
Really?
The U.S. started with something like just 200 B-17s.
Okay.
But in just 3 years,
Wow.
they built over 28,000 bombers,
Oh, my gosh.
including both B-17s and B-24s. I
Mm.
mean, it was this huge industrial effort.
Talk about scaling up.
Yeah.
Speaking of the B-17s, they were called flying fortresses, right?
Yeah.
Were they really that tough?
Well, they were pretty impressive for their time.
I bet.
Each B-17 had all these rotating turrets with 10 or 11 machine guns.
Wow.
That was way more firepower than any European plane had.
They were like porcupines in the sky. Yeah, something like that.
But even with all those guns, didn't they rely mostly on flying in formation for protection?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Even with all that firepower, strength in numbers was just key to survival.
Right.
They flew in these tight formations, box formations, they called them,
Okay.
which created this defensive web of hundreds of guns.
Wow.
So it made it a lot harder for enemy fighters to attack just one bomber.
It makes you wonder what it was actually like for those guys,
Yeah.
Be up there just surrounded by explosions, knowing that any moment could be their last. What did John Orlof have to say about that?
He really emphasized just how, fast
Yeah.
and intense air combat really was.
I bet.
Think about it. Bombers were flying at, 150 mile per hour?
Okay.
But enemy fighters could come at them at, over 500 miles.
Oh.
It was just this chaotic blur.
Yeah.
Decisions had to be made in fractions of a second.
It all happened so fast.
Attack.
And unlike ground troops, bomber crews couldn't really, duck for cover, right? Nope. They had to stay in formation no matter what was coming at them.
Oh, wow.
There was no running to the next foxhole up there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Orlof calls this the boomerang effect. They'd go from, the relative calm of life back on base to these just, life or death situations in the air over and over again.
Oh, man.
It was just this unique type of stress.
Yeah.
That very few other units in World War II experienced.
That constant back and forth must have taken such a toll.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's get back to the Bloody Hunt specifically. What did their missions actually look like? Where were they flying? Well, they flew, get this, over 8,630 sorties in total.
Wow.
Hitting targets from France all the way to Ukraine.
That's incredible.
Imagine that. Flying all over Europe from their base in England.
And it's important to really understand what sortie actually means here.
Okay.
We're not just talking about 8,630 missions. We're talking 8,630 individual aircraft flights.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So a single mission, like bombing a factory or something, can involve, dozens of planes. And each one of those is flying its own sortie.
So it was actually way more than 8,630 missions.
Exactly.
Wow. And I'm guessing each sortie was, pretty dangerous in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Each one was a huge risk.
Yeah.
The 100th Bombardment Group, they lost 177 aircraft.
Oh, my gosh.
And 732 airmen during the war.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that kind of loss.
It really is. And sadly, their experience, it was all too common for bomber groups in the European theater. The scale of the air war was just massive.
Yeah.
And so were the sacrifices these guys made.
It's so easy to forget that these weren't just numbers,
Right.
These were real people with families and lives outside of the war. What was it actually like to be inside one of those B-17s,
oh, man,
during a mission?
Orlof, he describes it as just this constant assault on your senses. Yeah. Imagine the noise of those four engines. The vibrations just going right through you.
Wow.
The air inside was freezing, especially at high altitudes,
Right.
And you're just crammed in there with all your crewmates.
You're essentially trapped in this, metal tube hurtling towards enemy territory.
Right.
Knowing that at any moment things could go terribly wrong.
Exactly. And then on top of all that, you've got the psychological aspect.
Right.
You're constantly scanning the skies, looking for enemy fighters.
I bet.
Orlof described one pilot who said, "You'd see a flicker of movement and your heart would jump into your throat."
Oh, God.
Could be a friendly fighter, could be a German.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know until it was almost on top of you.
Oh, man. That's a lot to handle.
It was.
He also mentioned something called flak.
Oh, yeah.
What exactly was that?
Flak was the term they used for anti-aircraft fire coming from the ground.
Okay.
Just picture, a sky filled with exploding shells, sending shrapnel everywhere.
So not only are you dodging enemy fighters, you've got this deadly rain of metal coming up at you from below.
That's right.
Oh, man.
And the Germans, they were really good at predicting bomber flight paths.
Really?
And aiming their flak accordingly.
It's incredible that any of them made it back.
It really is. They relied on their training, their instincts, and a lot of luck to get through each mission.
Orlof talked about, the impact of constantly facing death like that.
Yeah.
What did he have to say about it?
Well, he highlighted the struggle of going from these really intense, life or death experiences back to just the normalcy of life on base. It was this constant swinging between extremes.
That constant, switching between war and peace, it must have been incredibly jarring.
It was.
And it's not like you can just forget about what you'd seen up there.
Exactly. They witnessed horrific things, lost friends and comrades. Those experiences stayed with them.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that war doesn't end when the fighting stops, The psychological scars, they can run really deep.
Yeah.
We know he couldn't interview the main characters for the series, but did Orlof get to speak to any veterans of the Bloody Hunt?
He did.
Really?
Yeah. He actually attended a gathering of the 100th Bombardment Group Foundation.
Wow.
Where he met with surviving crew members, pilots, navigators, you name it.
What an amazing opportunity. What did he learn from those conversations?
He was really struck by their humility. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They were just doing their duty.
It's the hallmark of that generation, right?
It is.
They did what needed to be done, no fanfare.
Exactly.
Did they talk about their missions at all?
They did, but often in a very matter-of-fact way.
Hmm.
They talked a lot about the incredible bond they had with their crewmates.
I bet.
They relied on each other for survival, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
And that camaraderie, forged in the crucible of combat.
Right.
It lasted a lifetime for many of them.
There's something incredibly powerful about those kinds of bonds formed under those circumstances.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things Orlof really wanted to show in Masters of the Air,
Yeah.
The human side of the air war, the fear, the camaraderie, and the incredible resilience of these airmen.
It sounds like it's going to be a really moving and powerful series.
I think so.
We've talked a lot about the losses and the challenges the Bloody Hunt faced, but what about their accomplishments?
Oh, yeah?
Did they have any, notable successes?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
It's easy to focus on the losses, but
yeah,
we can't forget that the Bloody Hunt, they played a vital role in the Allied victory.
So they weren't just, enduring hardship. They were actually contributing to the war effort.
They were right there in the thick of it.
Yeah. What were some of their, most impactful contributions?
Well, they were a key part of this mission.
Okay.
The Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission.
Right.
It was a really daring, daylight raid on German ball bearing factories.
Hold on, ball bearings. Why were those so important?
Oh, ball bearings. Those were, essential.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely essential for producing tanks, aircraft, you name it.
Wow.
All kinds of war machines.
Okay.
The Allies, they figured, well, if we could, mess with the German supply of ball bearings,
right,
we could really hurt their ability to fight.
So it was this strategic attack aimed at the heart of the German war machine.
Exactly.
Was it successful?
It was a costly mission, that's for sure,
yeah,
for the Americans. But it did cause some pretty significant damage to the German war effort.
Really?
Yeah. And it just showed, I think, how important these, seemingly small parts were to the bigger picture,
So despite their heavy losses, the Bloody Hunt, they were making a real difference.
Oh, absolutely. And their impact, it went beyond just individual missions. You know, just their constant presence, their willingness to just keep going back into, heavily defended airspace.
Yeah.
That alone forced the Germans to, keep a lot of their defenses focused on them.
Ah, okay.
Which, in turn, helped the Allies on other fronts.
Yeah, right.
Other theaters of war.
So their sacrifices had, this ripple effect.
Yeah.
That went way beyond their own battles.
Exactly. Their courage and determination, they played a role in, turning the tide of the war.
Yeah.
Even if, the full impact of their actions wasn't always obvious right away.
It's a powerful reminder that, every act of bravery, every sacrifice, it all contributes to something much bigger,
It really does.
Even if it doesn't always make the headlines.
That's right.
It's a story of, resilience, courage, and the strength of the human spirit in the face of just incredible adversity.
Absolutely.
But beyond the battles,
right,
the strategic objectives, it seems like there's a bigger message here,
There is, yeah. The story of the Bloody Hunt, it's ultimately a story about the human cost of war. It reminds us that behind every statistic, every casualty figure are real people with families, dreams, and lives cut short.
Right.
Or, forever changed by conflict.
It's a reminder to remember to honor those sacrifices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the things Orlof really, emphasized was how important it is to see the individual stories within the bigger narrative of the war.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture.
Right.
But it's the personal experiences, the human cost.
Right.
That really brings history to life.
It's those stories that, help us connect on an emotional level.
Yeah.
That remind us that behind every uniform, every statistic is a person with a story worth telling.
Exactly. And from what I've seen, Masters of the Air seems to capture that well. Orlof talked about how even though he couldn't interview the main characters for the series, he was able to talk to other surviving members of the 100th.
Oh, wow.
Those conversations, they clearly left a mark on him.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through in the show.
It's that attention to detail, that respect for individual stories. That's what makes the difference. Cool. It's not just about recreating battles,
Right.
It's about understanding what it was like to be there, to experience those moments of camaraderie, fear, courage.
And speaking of courage,
yeah,
one story Orlof shared really stands out.
Oh, what's that?
He talked about this B-17 pilot.
Okay.
Who managed to land his plane.
Yeah.
Back at base.
Wow.
With only 2 engines working.
The plane was badly damaged.
Oh, yeah, it was. That must have been terrifying.
Absolutely. But what's amazing is the pilot, he just like shrugged it off.
He did.
Like it was no big deal.
He said it was part of the job.
It's that understated bravery.
Yeah.
That sense of duty and resilience that's just so inspiring.
And it's a reminder that, heroism isn't always about, grand gestures or big moments.
Right.
Sometimes it's about those quiet, everyday acts of courage.
Yeah.
The willingness to just keep going no matter what.
Right.
That's what truly defines a hero.
It's about doing what needs to be done. And we can't forget the sacrifices made by those men,
Right.
The men of the Bloody Hunt.
Yeah.
And all those who served in World War II.
Absolutely. It's a debt we can never fully repay.
Right.
But we can honor their memory by, remembering their stories.
Yeah.
Reflecting on the lessons learned.
Yeah.
And working towards a world where, those kinds of sacrifices aren't necessary anymore.
A world where peace prevails and the horrors of war are just something you read about in history books. It's a big goal, but one worth striving for, right?
Oh, it is.
And maybe by, really understanding the past, by looking at the realities of war, right, we can get a little closer to that kind of future.
I think that's what we can take away from, exploring the world of the Bloody Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a story about battles and bombers.
Yeah.
It's a story about the human spirit, about resilience, about the importance of remembering, and about the hope for a more peaceful world.
It's a story that stays with you.
It does.
So as we wrap up, we encourage you to keep learning about World War II, to honor the sacrifices made, and to never forget the lessons learned.
Absolutely.
And if you're looking for a powerful place to start, I highly recommend checking out Masters of the Air.
Yeah, me too. It's a reminder that even in, the darkest of times, hope endures, courage persists, and the human spirit. It can overcome even the most difficult challenges.
And with that, we'll leave you to think about the legacy of the Bloody Hunt, the impact of World War II, and that enduring hope for a more peaceful world.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.